Hey, happy Thursday, eighth graders. I want to know if you've ever heard of the word irony or ironic. If something is ironic, it is the opposite of what you would expect to happen. Okay, I put this mind blowing emoji here because it's like, wow, I didn't expect that to happen. It's the opposite of what I was expecting. Well, I think the best way to explain what irony is to give you a couple of examples.
Hey, it's fitness instructor Phil here, coming to you live from my workout gym. Hey, fitness instructor Phil here, but a little bit of a secret. I hate working out. I love eating junk food. I've got my Doritos, my 6-pack of Code Red, and my bag of candy. I'm about to have a great afternoon. Thanks. See you guys.
Oh, hello there. I'm Lyle the librarian. Good to see you today. And I just want to share with you all the books we have here. We have books by Edgar Allan Poe, by Mark Twain, by J.R.R. Tolkien. We have books from every author around the world. Books are so special to so many people. But let me tell you a little bit of a secret about myself. I can't stand to read. It is so pointless. Have a good day.
So there you have it. You wouldn't expect a librarian to hate reading, and you wouldn't expect a fitness instructor to hate working out and go home and eat junk food. That is the opposite of what you would expect to happen. Today in our lesson, we are going to have one of those ironic moments. Okay, so we're going to read about that. That's a little bit more toward the end of this lesson. What we're going to do is we're going to read page 272 to 274 together. So if you don't have your book, hit pause and go get it to follow along and read with me these pages, and I'm going to embed some questions in here so you can just answer them right in the video. So here we go. Let's go ahead and read on page 272. In 1800, the territory of the United States extended as far west as the Mississippi River. The area west of the river, known as the Louisiana Purchase, belonged to Spain. The Louisiana Territory was an enormous area of land, stretching south to the city of New Orleans and west to the Rocky Mountains. Its northern boundaries remained unidentified. Go ahead and look at this map here. So here is the Mississippi River. So this is a map of 1800. This is all of the United States so far. And this whole hunk is what's left to be explored. Now, this map gives you a little clue because we just read that it belonged to Spain, this area of Louisiana. Well, there's going to be a little transaction and it's going to end up with France. So we're going to deal with France here to acquire this land. And the reason we get a little bit alarmed about all of this is there's a city right here on the Mississippi River called New Orleans. It's a port that would be very important for trade. So that listen carefully for when New Orleans comes in. But here's your visual of what the United States looks like in 1800. Let's keep reading. During the early 1800s, Americans moved west in search for travel over the mountains in search of land and adventure. Pioneers, many of them farmers, traveled over the mountains into Kentucky and Tennessee. Many also set out for land less settled in the areas of the Northwest Territory. They made long and exhausting journey over the Appalachian Mountains. Pioneers heading toward the western lands had to travel along rough, muddy roads or cut their way through thick forests. These westward bound pioneers loaded their household goods into Conestoga wagons, sturdy vehicles topped with white canvas. I'm sure that this particular picture looks familiar to you, especially those of you that are Little House on the Prairie fans. But this is the kind of wagon they're talking about. Okay, a canvas-covered wagon, sturdy wheels as they go over the Appalachians through different trails to get out west. So there's a picture for you of what that wagon looked like. Let's continue reading. The settlers traveled with their two most valued possessions, rifles and axes. They needed rifles for protection and to hunt animals for food. They used axes to cut paths for their wagons through the dense forests. Many of the pioneers set up farms along the rivers that fed into the upper Mississippi River. Farmers needed access to the Mississippi to transport their crops on the market. Their goods traveled down the Mississippi River to New Orleans, where workers then loaded them onto other ships bound for markets on the East Coast. The Spanish controlled this region, but they allowed the Americans to sail on the lower Mississippi and trade in New Orleans. For the Western farmers, this agreement was vital to their survival. Okay, they needed the port, and Spain allowed that to happen. Now, the French are going to come in. For some years, the Spanish allowed American goods to move freely in their territory. But then, in 1802, the Spanish suddenly changed their policy, no longer allowing American goods to move into and beyond New Orleans. President Jefferson learned that Spain and France had secretly agreed to transfer the Louisiana Territory to France. Jefferson believed that France had also gained Florida in this secret agreement with Spain. So now it all belongs to France. And this alarmed Jefferson. The agreement between Spain and France posed a serious threat to the United States. France's leader, Napoleon Bonaparte, had plans to create empires in Europe and the Americas. French control would put American trade along the Mississippi River at risk. Congress authorized Robert Livingston, the new minister to France, to offer as much as $2 million for New Orleans and West Florida in order to gain control of the territory. So again, what we're fighting over right now is this little area down here, because they have found out that France probably isn't going to be as flexible as what Spain was. And they need New Orleans because they got to ship their crops downriver and then be able to trade with with East Coast trade markets. So they needed New Orleans. So they're going to send someone to try to buy New Orleans. Napoleon and Santo Domingo. Napoleon dreamed of a Western empire. He wanted to come over and colonize the Americas for France. He saw the Caribbean island of Santo Domingo as an important naval base from which he could control such an empire. Remember, Santo Domingo is what is Haiti today. So he looked at that and said, that's where I want to be so I can control this empire. Well, events in Santo Domingo, however, ended Napoleon's dream. Inspired by the ideas of the French Revolution, Toussaint Louverture, an enslaved African, led enslaved Africans and other laborers in Santo Domingo in a revolt against the island's plantation owners. And after fierce fighting, the rebels, the slaves, won and declared their colony an independent republic. Louverture established a new government. So, in 1802, Napoleon sent troops to regain control of Santo Domingo, but they were not successful. And by 1804, the French were driven out of Santo Domingo, and the country took its original name, Haiti. So that kind of prevents Haiti, or it prevents France from having that stronghold, a place to kind of control its empire. So things aren't looking good for Napoleon. Napoleon had a problem. He needed money to finance his war against Britain. And without Santo Domingo, Napoleon had little use for Louisiana. And in order to solve his money problem, he decided to sell the Louisiana Territory. A French official told the U.S. representatives Robert Livingston and James Monroe that the entire Louisiana Territory was for sale. The offer took Livingston and Monroe by surprise. They did not have the authority to accept such an offer. However, the deal was too good to pass up. So let's look at that one more time. What they were hoping for was Louisiana and this little part of western Florida here. Napoleon was so hard up for money, he was willing to sell the whole shebang here. Livingston and Monroe were not prepared to make that big of a deal, but they couldn't pass it up because, yeah, that would help westward expansion. Let's keep reading. The deal was too good to pass up. The new territory would provide plenty of cheap land for farmers for future generations. It would also give the United States control of the Mississippi River, which protected domestic shipping interests. These benefits convinced Livingston and Monroe to close the deal, even though they did not have authorization to buy that whole territory. After a few days of negotiation, the parties agreed to a price of $15 million. So they got that whole shebang, New Orleans, the whole Louisiana purchase for $15 million. So that is a real estate steal. They couldn't pass it up. However, I hope you're envisioning the mind exploding emoji right now because something ironic just happened. Let's keep reading. Jefferson worried that such a purchase might not be legal. The Constitution said nothing about acquiring new territory. By what authority could he buy that land? He thought of seeking a constitutional amendment, but he realized there was no time for such a step. Jefferson decided the government's treaty-making powers allowed the purchase of a new territory. The Senate approved the purchase in October of 1803, and the Louisiana Purchase territory doubled the size of the United States. Let me show you one thing. Remember, Jefferson's party, the Democratic Republicans, said powers of the government were limited to what was absolutely necessary. They wanted a small government. They said that the Constitution had to be read word for word, and it rejected these ideas of implied power. Well, Jefferson was the one that authorized a purchase that is not, that power for a purchase like that is not written in the Constitution. And he authorized a huge amount of spending, which would be opposite of what you would expect of a Democratic Republican. It's like a librarian who doesn't like to read, or a fitness instructor who doesn't like to work out but would rather eat junk food. A Democratic Republican did something that was not written word for word in the Constitution, and he spent a ton of money to do it. Now, we realize he had to. I mean, it was the steal of the century, but it is still very, very ironic. All right, that's all you need to do for me today was to answer those questions as we went. And tomorrow we will continue to look at this purchase and Lewis and Clark. Have a great day, 8th graders. Let me show you one thing. Remember, Jefferson's party, the Democratic Republicans, said powers of the government were limited to what was absolutely necessary. They wanted a small government. They said that the Constitution had to be read word for word, and it rejected these ideas of implied power. Well, Jefferson was the one that authorized a purchase that is not, that power for a purchase like that is not written in the Constitution. And he authorized a huge amount of spending, which would be opposite of what you would expect of a Democratic Republican. It's like a librarian who doesn't like to read, or a fitness instructor who doesn't like to work out but would rather eat junk food. A Democratic Republican did something that was not written word for word in the Constitution, and he spent a ton of money to do it. Now we realize he had to. I mean, it was the steal of the century, but it is still very, very ironic. All right, that's all you need to do for me today, was to answer those questions as we went. And tomorrow we will continue to look at this purchase and Lewis and Clark. Have a great day, eighth graders.